Okay, I think that'll do it. Um, okay. Okay, I guess everybody can see the screen now. The shared screen should be
Yep.
anyway.
Yes.
All right, I think we're good to go here. All right. Okay, so I think we're about ready to go. We got gonna wait one more minute. We got we got a minion. We got enough people to get started here tonight, but want to wait one more minute because some people are on Jewish Standard Time. So, um, so here we are. We've finally closed out this year's High Holy Days, fall festivals, and um, I'm not real sure I've yet to catch up on all the sleep, but it's having generally speaking, some of the fall holidays will fall on Shabbat or close enough to it that we'll celebrate those, and this year it was just not so, and so we tried to make sure that we did all of the biblically mandated um, holy convocations and all that entails uh, when throughout the year. So that throughout the season, so that involved doing quite a bit of extra work that I'm not normally used to, and have didn't have um, uh, prior things for it, and so it was an awful lot of work, and just kind of got me tired this year for some reason, and but now it's over with, and we are getting ready to start. Well, we've already started Better Sheet, and then but since we were over in that other that smaller building where we don't have any classrooms or anything like that, um, we didn't have any classes afterwards, and so for a variety of reasons, those of you that are not here in our congregation, twice a year we get booted out of our place that we rent uh, for long-standing events that they've been doing for, well, this craft fair that they do. They've been doing that for 35 years, they said, or 40 years, something like that. So we have to move over to some place where they don't have this craft fair stuff. So, but it's not as large, and like last week. Shabbat morning, we had even with people not being able to find us and all that kind of stuff, we had 80 people show up for that service. And generally speaking, when we have to go over there, some people say, "Nah, it's just not worth it trying to cram into that little space." So, but we definitely crammed into the little space, and we had a nice service. And so now this coming week, it's going to be back to normal. If anything in a Messianic congregation can be classified as normal, that's where we're going back to. So, all right. So I think we got about 15 folks here online, and some of you are couples, so that boosted up a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and begin. And first of all, I'm going to begin by muting everybody. And you know the rules. If you need to say something, just unmute yourself and say away. All right, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Okay, so tonight we're going to be doing chapter 2. Now, remember that there is a difference between the numbering of the Hebrew Bible and the English translations that we have. For instance, the King James Version and all of the normal Bibles that you would have. Now, our own Tree of Life version that we use in our congregation, I say our own, the one that we use. It just coincidentally happened to be called the Tree of Life version, but the one that we use in our congregation is based directly off of the Hebrew Bible. And so in the English versions, chapter 1 had 21 verses, whereas the Hebrew Bible had 17 verses. And we're not gonna lose any verses or anything like that. But what I did was, if you look at this first slide, I've got the Hebrew Bible references, and then in parentheses I have the English Bible numbers, so that if you're looking at an English Bible while we're going through this, you'll be able to follow along with it. All right, so and just so you know, we did have a really nice gathering last week at our house for Sukkot, and not as many people as normal for some reason. I don't know why that was, but well, I do know some families, their husband was working offshore, or there's this and that and the other. So I knew some of them were not going to be able to come out, but it was still a very nice participation and a gathering, and we really enjoyed it. So, so anyway, if there are no questions or comments to get before I get started, we'll go ahead and jump in. Zechariah 2 verses 1 and 2 says, "Then I lifted up my eyes, and behold, I saw 4 horns. And I said to the angel speaking with me, 'What are these?' And he said to me, 'These are the horns that have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem.'" All right, so this second vision here, it kind of elaborates on the concept of comfort that was promised in the first vision, in the first chapter. And so here we learn that how God will execute his anger against the nations, that those nations that specifically oppressed his people. And so this is kind of a payback. And what goes around comes around, or however that saying goes. And so we're taking this up now. He talks about horns. Now, and then also blacksmiths, but uh, the idea of the horns, the word that they use here for horns is not a ram's horn, like a shofar, but the word Karen, which can be it's a generic term for animal horns, or the extruding corners that like on um, an altar, where they had altars, they would have horns come off of the corners of the altar. And there's many examples of that throughout Israel. The one I remember specifically was down in Beersheba, and where the one that was there, they have taken it and put it up in the museum in Jerusalem. And so the one that is the original is in Jerusalem. The one that is in there in Beersheba is a duplicate, or it was made to look exactly like the one that they took to Jerusalem. And it's a stone altar, at probably, I don't know, 3 feet wide, and then on the ends they have those horns. So the word horn here, Karen, can be used for a generic term for an animal horn, the altar, or it also a metaphor for power. And that was a common metaphor back in those days that we don't really see it ourselves. But if you think of a bull or some other big animal that's got antlers or horns that they can use effectively to battle or to defend. And so the angel here said, well, these horns represent the nations who scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. And so there's actually, when I was studying this, and I got all sorts of books out, and there were at least 6 different interpretations of who the horns represented, what they represented. And so some of them, they'll say, well, this is Assyria, Babylon, and maybe Egypt and Edom, Tyre, maybe even Persia. And so they more often, I think, generally speaking, the scholars look at the 4 horns and they say, well, this is just a symbol of all the nations that have oppressed Israel from the 4 corners of the world, and so that would speak to that. Uh, and so going on with that, I think we'll just leave that there. Verses 3 to 4. Then Adonai showed me 4 craftsmen. I asked, what are these coming to do? And he answered, these are the horns that scattered Judah so that no one could raise his head. But the craftsmen have come to frighten them, to cast down the horns of the nations that have lifted up their horn against the land of Judah to scatter it. So what we see here is the Hebrew word for craftsman is harasim, and it indicates, generally speaking, it indicates a workman that is skilled in wood, stone, or metal. And since the material of the horns, it's not mentioned, okay, are these animal horns? Are they metallic horns? Are they stone horns? The idea of just a traditional all-around craftsman is probably more appropriate here. Now, some translations they translated the word harasim as smiths, like blacksmiths, but that's just assuming that these horns were iron. So Now, the identity of the craftsman depends on, I guess, the identity of the horns. If the horns are the succeeding kingdoms in Daniel's vision, in Daniel 2:7, then the craftsman would be the Medo-Persians, the one that came after them, that destroyed those kingdoms, Greece, Rome, and then the Messianic kingdom. Each one follows the other. Um, Otherwise, they were probably nations, including Persia, whatever nations that uh, that God used to overthrow Israel's past oppressors. He used nations to punish Israel, but then after that punishment was over, he would go after those particular nations because inevitably the nations would overstep the bounds that God had intended for them, and they would become much more oppressive and vicious and always, seemed like they were always trying to take Israel's Jewishness away from them, especially like the Greeks with Antiochus Epiphanes, where he forbade any kind of expression of Jewish religion or culture to the point that you know women that had their sons um, they went through a Brit Milah circumcised, uh, and they were caught. Then the child was killed, disemboweled, and then tied to the woman that she had to carry the child around, tied to her, and it was a horrible horrible thing. So a lot of these nations were really bad actors, and so God came back down on them and says, "Okay, we're going to beat these horns down so that they're no longer a threat." So um, he's going to punish these nations, and that's going to be a comfort then to to the Jewish people, to Jerusalem, and everything that they stand for. Um, okay, comments or questions? All right, verse 5 and 6 here. I lifted up my eyes, and behold, I saw a man with a measuring line in his hand. I asked, where are you going? And he answered me, to measure Jerusalem, to see how wide and how long it is. So this uh, the expression where he says, I looked up, uh, it kind of points us in a transition. We're going to a new vision here, but it's also a continuity. It's a continuation of the preceding one. It's just a different, same act, just a different scene, I guess you would say. And so the divine judgment on the Gentile nations would be followed by God's enlarging and protecting Jerusalem. Now, this this basic message of the vision is clear, but the details they're not so clear because of answering several questions like who are the persons that are mentioned in the vision, and what's the position and movement of each person, and who is speaking. And so um, um, it makes makes it kind of difficult sometimes to figure something out. Hang on just a second, if you would, please. Okay, I apologize for that. Um, So anyway, the man who's identified here, his occupation is a surveyor, and it's identified by this measuring line in his hand. A um, a different word is used for a measuring line here than it was back in chapter 1 and 16. And this is the only occurrence of this two-word phrase, kevel midah, in the Old Testament. Only places you'll find it, kevel midah. And it's uh, it describes what we would say would be a measuring line that is more like something that a surveyor would use, some kind of rods or something that used by a surveyor rather than say a builder's string, which would used in the construction process. Like if you were laying bricks or blocks or something like that, and you put a string on something and a string over at the other end, and then you put the bricks along that string so that it's level. And I don't really know how in those days if they had some way of figuring out something that was level. I guess they could possibly put some kind of a bowl or something that would a water level or something like that. I don't know how they did it back in those days. But what they're talking about here was a surveyor that was using something to like lay out big plots of land, like the size or the circumference or whatever of Jerusalem. And remember that at this time, at this point in history, where Zechariah was ministering, it was a time of rebuilding for Jerusalem. They'd come back from the exile, and they had started on the temple. Then they had like a 16-year hiccup where they didn't do anything, and then now they're back to it and building up the temple and repairing some of the breaches in the walls and so forth. But anyway, this what they're talking about here, though, is probably more of a future Jerusalem, and they talk about him as a young man, an ish, and as opposed to an angel, and so I think in this particular vision, this doesn't have to be somebody who is um, an angel. It could very well be just a regular person that with no other special power or anything other than he was just a man, a surveyor. And so they don't identify who he was, but there are those that would say, well, there's maybe he was the angel of the Lord, or based on something from Ezekiel or something like that, um, and comparing it to Zechariah's first vision. And so, but I'm not real sure that it has to be like that. So, and I'm not sure that it makes any difference anywhere, anyhow. So, uh, not a whole lot of use in arguing, going too deeply in it. But these are messages that from the Lord Himself, and they are addressed first to the young man, and then to Israel, and then finally to all of mankind later on in the chapter. So it's obvious that the surveyor's purpose was to uh, mark out the boundaries of Jerusalem, which would make sense because they were rebuilding Jerusalem, and then you might want to expand this wall or that wall or whatever, and so that would make sense in his vision. So, but then we come to the next couple of verses. Then let's see. So it says, well, where do, okay. But then behold, the angel speaking with me left, and another angel went out to meet him, saying to him, Run, speak to this young man, saying, Jerusalem will be inhabited as a village without walls because of the great number of men and livestock in it. All right, so the language here is somewhat confusing. The the verses had explained the meaning of the man, with the measuring rod. And so it allowed us to listen to what the angels were saying between the two. This conversation between angels as messengers, and then telling to the man. And so uh, then they're telling him, this one angel goes to tell the other one, and he don't pick it up from the Bible verse very very well. He's telling him to not measure Jerusalem. Don't do it because it's not going to have walls. And so what you read here, you have to infer then that um, he was making these measurements to know, to tell the builders where to put your corner stakes, and how to build the walls. And the angel is telling him, no, no, don't do that. We don't know which angel it was that told him, but it seems more likely that it would be the angel that was had been guiding Zechariah through his vision here. And so, anyway, told him, don't do that because Jerusalem is going to be so big. It's going to be like this great big village with so many people and so much livestock, so much commerce, that walls just would not work. I mean, just walls couldn't contain it, is what he's saying there. So, what I think you have to look at here is that this is definitely a vision of the millennial Jerusalem. This is a vision for a long time away, because in Zechariah's time, certainly Jerusalem would need walls, and it did indeed have walls, because we know that after after they rebuilt, here came Alexander the Great, and they had walls, and so that's when the high priest went out and talked to Alexander the Great, and the Alexander was so impressed with this high priest that he decided, okay, you know what, I'm just going to let the people of Jerusalem live their lives, and they understand that I'm conquering the whole world, and so I will just leave them alone because they got a great religion, and I don't want to mess it up. And so so the story goes anyway. And then later on, Antiochus Epiphanes, he's coming against the walls of Jerusalem, and then of course. Much further on, the Romans laid siege to Jerusalem, and eventually destroyed the temple in 70 AD. And so we know that Jerusalem had walls, but now in the millennial period, there will be no need for walls, because there will be no enemies that could even attempt, or even uh, well, warfare will be much different in the millennial, right before the millennial period. And so walls would not really be very effective at any rate. The only walls that they would have would be like what they have today, with the Iron Dome, and I forget what they call the other things that they had, but electronic um, protection. But clearly in the millennial period, they're not going to need it, because Yeshua will be ruling and reigning from Jerusalem, and nobody would be able to go against Israel. Now, here's an AI generated um, picture of a dude with he's got his sticks and his stakes out there, with his measuring this. So that's the surveyor. And yeah, I don't know how particularly accurate that is, but that's what AI thought it would look like anyway. So I thought it was pretty cool. Just from they drew that up from what I told him to draw up. So kind of cool. I didn't go for the wings on the and the halos on the angels, but I think my AI is probably Catholic. I'm not sure. So, all right, going ahead. Verse 9. For I, it is a declaration of Adonai, will be a wall of fire around it, and I will be the glory inside it. So, the Lord promised to be Israel's defense, a wall of fire, as it were, instead of a physical wall. And he said he would be the glory in her midst, in contrast to say any human glory. And you know that Yeshua's going to be there, reigning and ruling from Jerusalem, and so that's going to be just such, where God is tabernacling with us in Jerusalem. So there's nothing that could surpass that in the glory inside. And then God said, I'll protect the outside from in it. Nobody's going to come against you. And so I look at that wall of fire, kind of like, the Iron Dome is kind of a very primitive, earthly, uh, human version of what God could do, except that with God's walls of fire none of the missiles will get through, whereas the Iron Dome did. Some did get through. So um, anyway, the so this I think the whole thing points toward the millennial period when Yeshua will be there. There's going to be peace around Jerusalem. There's not going to be any need for the walls. And, God says, yeah, we're going to do it because I said we're going to do it. That's what we're doing. So, so here at this time, when others such as Nehemiah were interested in rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, and they also, you know, they excluded from their community all of them the divorced wives. Some of these guys they had married foreigners in Babylon, and so they required them to divorce their wives, send them back to their families in Babylon because they didn't want these foreign women in Jerusalem. Kind of that tough love, I guess it was. But so these second, third visions guarantee a future safety for Jerusalem, and so it would seem that it's got to be the millennial period as such. So now verses 10 and 11. Says, Oi, oi, flee from the land of the north. It is a declaration of Adonai, because I scattered you like the four winds of heaven. It is a declaration of Adonai. Oi, Zion, escape, you who are living with the daughter of Babylon. Okay. So most English translators, they usually render this Hebrew word oi as woe, and we've seen the other in some of the other minor prophets when they would say oi to Jerusalem, oi to this, and it is woe. It's too bad about you. This is coming, and so it announces some kind of prophetic lament, and we see. We just see it just in many places. But here it's more a call of attention, a call to attention, and where he's saying, "Hey, you, listen up here, you guys, all of you," and I don't remember where the phrase or what it come a movie or a TV show or something like where they go, "Hey, you guys," and so I think that's what he's saying there. Other translation will say, they can say, come away or up or oh or listen. So that's what the oi means there. It's not a declaration of doom and gloom in this particular case. So he's calling on the people to leave the land of the north. Now, where's the land of the north? Well, that would be Babylon, because that's where the Jews have been taken to. And we know that the majority, the vast majority of the Jews that were taken into Babylon, and they over the 70 years there, 80 years by this point, or more, they uh, they had decided, well, you know what, life is great here. We've built good business, and I mean, all of these people over here in Babylon, the Babylonians really do like bagels and lox and all of that kind of stuff. So we're doing a good job selling kosher food to the Babylonians. I don't know, and that's not in the Bible. I was making that up. But they had great businesses, and they also built great yeshivas. Great universities of studying Torah. Carmen, you got a comment?
I have a question. So, but like, so some of them wouldn't leave, and now they're saying come out of there, and they're like 80. You said, well, if they took them when they're 20 or something, and they've lived there, and now they're on their deathbed, and their children grew up there and they don't know any different because they were raised there for 70 years,
Hmm.
or let's say they were
Yeah,
born there,
yeah,
so 50
yeah.
years, whatever. Well, how, you know, I can see why they wouldn't know any different. They wouldn't know to let's get out of here because we need to go back to our country.
Well,
We don't
yeah,
but we don't belong here because they would feel like they belong there, or they're dying, so I might as well just stay.
yeah. Well, that's a good comment, and it could very well be that many of them thought that, but um, notwithstanding that, the Lord says, "No, come out of there, come back home. I want you to come back home." They
Oh,
did.
okay. So it's a
They
command
did.
that you come
It was,
home now. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
it was a
Like a command. Yeah.
kind of like a command,
Yeah.
uh, ET phone home, and so that's what the Lord is telling them to do, and we know that they did not do that, and but God is graceful. He's very gracious, and even though these people disobeyed him and stayed in Babylon, well, what that did was that set up a culture, um, kind of a landing pad for the Jewish people for several generations, several hundred years later, because now they had a thriving culture in the Mesopotamia, that area of Babylon, for when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and Israel, and so the people were able to flee to there, and also by that time the people there had these wonderful yeshivas, and that's where we get the Babylonian Talmud from, and so you know. Even though they didn't follow God's instructions, God's used them anyway because they're His chosen people, and they contributed to the welfare of Israel, even from afar. But it does not excuse them from not doing what God told them to do, and so he told them, escape from there. Go ahead and get out because you got a chance to leave now. I want you to leave. And they, some probably did come back, but the majority did not.
Yeah.
And so they suffer much repercussions from it? I'm not sure. If they did, it's not recorded. Certainly not recorded in the Bible. But did Israel suffer because of it? Yeah, because it would have been much better had the people come in force back to the land and basically taking it over again and forcing the misdeeds of the Assyrians and the Babylonians in the population that was still there, like the Samaritans, um, that they could somehow overcome that, but they didn't do that. And so they still had all of those kind of problems within the land um, that plagued them for generations and even to this day. It's called Gaza and Hamas. But anyway, that's uh, that's what he was telling them to do. Come away, get out of there. I want you to come back home. And they just didn't do that. So, so any other comments or questions on that? Okay. Verse 12, it says, For thus says Adonai Svaot, He has sent me after glory to the nations that plundered you, because whoever touches you touches the apple of his eye. Now, okay, this is grammatically, in Hebrew and in English, it's very awkward, the construction of it. And so I think you have to look at it and you say, well, okay, what does this really mean? And I think it says, so I think it means that Zechariah or perhaps someone else, and we'll talk about that in the next verse, will be sent to the nations who have been humbled by the Lord, who previously had oppressed Israel, but now they're humbled by the Lord. And he will be relaying God's judgment on the nations who had oppressed Israel. Now he's telling them that God's chosen people are the apple of God's eye. Now that's it's an expression that we know it as meaning most favored, or that's very precious to someone.
Rabbi, the apple of your eye, it says, Kicha nogea bechem nogea bevavat eno. He that touches you touches the apple of his eye. The apple of your eye is actually, because your eye is not perfectly round, the apple of your eye is that part in the very front there, your little cornea, that bulges out a little bit, and that's the apple of the eye. And basically, what's saying, you mess with God's people, you're poking God in the eye. God doesn't like that. And
Yeah.
that's how serious this is. It's not
Oh
it's
yeah.
not just a cute little saying. It means something.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm just saying that this is where that saying comes from that we use all the time about something being the apple of their eye, that would say, oh, it's something precious. But what they're saying here, though, is that when you mess with God's people, it's like you're sticking poking a stick right in the very center, the most sensitive part of God's eye. And if somebody pokes you in the eye with a stick, you're not going to be very happy. And so that's where God is coming down on that one. And so we've kind of made that into a different kind of expression that yeah, something that's the precious, boy, that baby boy, that little baby, that's the apple of his eye, uh, and no, it's just that's not where it originally came from. It came more out of pain than out of love. So uh, you're right about that. Okay. um So verse 13. Oops. For behold, I will shake my hand against them, and they will be plunder to their servants. Then you will know that Adonai Svaot has sent me. All right, so here we get to this point that again, it's kind of another confusing verse because uh, who's on first and who's on second, and um, and so in Hebrew, who is he and he is she, and so um, if if you know anything about Hebrew, you know that those kind of expressions, but um, it is kind of confusing in a way. So some writers say, well, this is referring to Zechariah being sent away to these nations, but we know that didn't happen. And then that others say, well, it must be the Messiah at a future time, and it can be interpreted either way, and perhaps even both ways. If Zechariah had the ability to write letters or send correspondence to these other nations. So, um, but the thing about it is, the one of the writers that I use here, it says that Thomas Constable said that the person whom the Lord would send as his representative could not be Zechariah in view of what the following verses say he would do. He must be the Messiah, the only one with sufficient power and authority to fulfill what God predicted here. He would simply wave his hand over these nations in a menacing gesture, and they would become plunder for the Israelites whom they had enslaved. And that makes sense. And so we know that at the second coming of the Messiah, that all the armies of the world that are arrayed against Israel will be destroyed. And this is by the word of his mouth. And so he just will declare it, kind of like when God declared, "Let there be light," and there was. And Yeshua will say something about, no, you're defeated, I win, you lose, and they all die. So at that point, then God's people will know that this is a miraculous thing. This is no other than Adonai Svaot, the Lord of hosts, that has sent this one. And so then the Jews, later in the next verse, it said, they should rejoice, return to the land, and look to the future with hope. So, verse 14. Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for behold, I am coming and I will live among you. It is a declaration of Adonai. And so, yeah, this is the time for Israel to rejoice and praise God because, in that millennial period, they're going to have their backs to the wall and they're totally going to be on the ropes. And then Yeshua comes in and saves them. At that point, they're going to say, Baruch haba Hashem Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And the word that they use here, where he says he's coming to live, the Hebrew word there is shakan, and it means to tabernacle with. And remember, one of the names of the tabernacle that they had in the wilderness was the Mishkan. And so it's kind of taken from that. And so, and God has said, yeah, and do this, and I will live with among you, and you can take it to the bank because it's a declaration of Adonai. And so he's putting his stamp of approval on his own statement, is how he's saying that. So, um, okay, let's go ahead. In that day, many nations will join themselves to Adonai, and they will be my people, and I will dwell among you. Then you will know that Adonai Svaot has sent me to you. All right. So, the Yeshua's return, the Messiah's return to Jerusalem, would prompt all the nations to come there and acknowledge him as sovereign. And many of the nations will turn to the Lord in that day. They'll become uh, they will become part of the family of believers, and that's we know that the nations are going to be coming to Jerusalem because once a year, every nation will have to send a representative to the temple where Yeshua will be um, and acknowledge him as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And if they don't, then it says that they will have no rain for a year, meaning that their economy is going to go in the tank for a whole year. And then these nations are going to be turning to God. Well, and it might be easier or reasonable to understand that they would be doing that because they're going to see the incredible power that God had in just destroying these armies. That's going to scare the bejeebers out of a lot of people, and they're going to say, this is really God. Maybe we didn't really believe in God before, or a God, or this, that. But um, at that point, people are gonna, you hear the expression, the come to Jesus meeting. Well, that's what they're gonna have, and they will flock to become part of this Jewish nation, and so there will be converts from all over the world, and I said here that this is the ultimate portrayal of being grafted in to the vine, which is Yeshua. And so he's going to be acknowledged. Yeshua will be acknowledged all over the world. And so um, this has to be talking about the second coming of the Lord, because certainly in the first coming, when he was born of a virgin as a little baby, nobody listened. I mean, not everybody believed it. I mean, it was very, very few, considering the population of the world, very, very few believed it. But at the second coming, it's going to be so overwhelming that people will just have no real choice. You'd have to be a special kind of stupid not to believe it. And so um, the let's look at verse 16 then. This was kind of a short lesson tonight, but that's okay. It says, Adonai will inherit Judah as his portion in the Holy Land and will once again choose Jerusalem. All right, so there is a an expression here that they have here that it's what I've said here, like here is Admat HaKodesh is it's the only place. We talk about Israel being the Holy Land. I mean that's been the Crusaders called it the Holy Land, and everybody calls it the Holy Land. Well, there's only one place in all the Bible that it's called the Holy Land, and it's right here, Admat HaKodesh, and uh, no place else in the Bible is it called that. And so, and I thought it was kind of interesting that God had said several times when he was talking about establishing the idea of the Shemitah year and then the Yovel, the Jubilee year, that he says, now all the land belongs to me. And you guys are just kind of, you can rent it, you can lease the land, but the land belongs to me. That's why I say you have to give it back to the original clans, because that's what I decreed. And but here now, even though he had said many times that, okay, Israel belongs to me, and of course the whole universe and everything else belongs to God too. But um, here he's saying, okay, I'm laying a special claim, this inheritance. I'm going to inherit this part here, which is Jerusalem, and that's where I had chosen to put my name. That's the place that I want, and he's setting it aside for his own inheritance. And that makes it, oh man, that makes it just kind of nine times kind of special. Um, that it's kind of hard to get your whole arms around how that God said, no, that little piece of real estate I'm going to claim for mine because that's where I'm going to dwell with my people. And that's kind of gives me shivers just to think about it. So, verse 17 said, "Be silent before Adonai, all flesh, for he has aroused himself from his holy dwelling." All right, so here's a time it's kind of in a way it's because in the one part of the Bible says, if we don't praise him, even the rocks will cry out. But now they're saying that, okay, be silent. And so when God is coming down into to dwell with us, I think it's going to be like when the first tabernacle was ordained and commissioned, that the power of God was so strong that the priest, Moses, Aaron, all those guys, they couldn't even get off the ground. I mean, they were flat faced in the ground and they couldn't get up. And then the same thing happened when Solomon's temple was dedicated, that the Spirit of God came down on that temple so strongly that everyone within the temple grounds was just uh, flat down on the ground, couldn't get up because of the heaviness, the kavod of God. The glory of God was so heavy on them. And so I think it's possibly what this may be harking back to, that where all the world will be silent in just they're awestruck. There's no words. And we all know people that never seem to be at a loss for words. They're always talking. And even at that point, I believe when they see the awesome power and glory of the Lord come down and dwell in Jerusalem, that there just will not be words. They will be silent before the Lord. And it's going to be that reverent awe of, what do you say? You stand there with your mouth open and just going,
I think some people are going to be saying, "Oh, I'm in trouble now."
could possibly be. Could possibly be. All right. So, all right. Now that's the lesson for tonight. I ended up a few minutes early. I knew I would because I didn't have that many words on everything. But we'll be jumping back into chapter 3 next week. And are there any other comments or questions on this or where we're going, what we're doing?
I have one.
Go ahead, Rudy.
Um, so in the last day, the when judgment comes, it says that the that Satan is going to be released after the millennium. Um, so it doesn't make sense that people, if Yeshua's here in the millennium, right? Like you said earlier, kind of stupid if you go against him. But when the judgment comes, or when Satan gets released for that short time, he's going to turn so many nations, right? He said it's going to be like the seas of the shore or the sand of the sea. That many people against Jerusalem, and at that time, when they come against Jerusalem, is when they're going to be, I guess, annihilated or whatever. But can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, that in the millennial period, there will be people that are not believers. I mean, not everybody, there will be people that are not believers that make it through the Great Tribulation, and they're in the millennial period, and they're not believers, they're not followers of God. They're just secular human beings that don't follow the Lord. And so um and there's going to be lots of people like that. Will there be a chance for people to be saved during the millennial period? I believe so. But there will be people who will not avail themselves to that opportunity, and they're not going to be believers, and they're not going to follow God's word. Now, the Bible says that Yeshua will rule the world with a rod of iron. Now, if he didn't have why would he need a rod of iron if everybody was compliant and worshipful? No, there's going to be people that rebel against his rulings, and um, so I believe that at the end, those kind of people will be those kind of people will be the ones that turn against the Lord, because now they've got somebody to lead them, and they're going to come against the Lord foolishly, thinking that they could overcome him. So that's where the people would be coming from. It's not going to be it is not going to be from the believers. I don't believe that Satan is going to have an opportunity to or that's going to have the ability to wholesale turn believers um, into against God, because those of us that are believers now when the millennial period begins, we'll have a glorified body. I mean, we're going to be at a different plane, a different level. People that become believers during the millennial period will continue to be just humans. The way I read it now, I may very well be wrong in that, but
Rabbi Steve,
yeah.
it says something, really says something about human nature, doesn't it? That uh, this whole flesh nature that we have, um, very prideful, that we want our own way. We really don't, you know, we, we see even in the church that people don't like authority. People rebel, even, even people rebel against godly authority. And Yeshua, I mean, he's coming. He's going to be with a rod of iron, and that old sin nature. I mean, it's we've all inherited it from Adam, and that pride. Uh, and there's going to be those who are going to say, you know what, we've been under the thumb of this Messiah, of this God, for all this time, and given the chance, they will rebel, because like you
Yeah.
said, they'll have somebody to follow. Hey, beast,
Well, you
out of the
thought,
pit.
yeah, you saw it this weekend. They were having a practice run. It's called No King's Day,
Yeah, yeah,
uh, and somewhere along the line, in the millennial period, they're going to have a No King's Day and go against the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and it's not going to be pretty.
yeah. And it's got nothing to do with logic. It has all to do with feeling, and that's probably going to be what the case is after the millennium.
Yeah, it's certainly not going to. If it was logical, if it made sense, then they would never do it. But Um, you know, Satan works with people's emotions and their desires rather than their
Yep,
brain. So
yep,
anyway,
yeah, absolutely.
yep,
Right.
that's where we're at.
Thank you, Rabbi. It's great teaching, and I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right, guys. Any other comments? Joseph, I saw that you were going to say something. Yeah.
Oh, just Isaiah 65, 20, 23 has something to do with it. I'm not sure. You can help me out, Rabbi. It says, no more shall an infant from there live but a few days, nor an old man who has not fulfilled his days, for the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. Is that the millennium, or is that some other time?
No, that's going to be in the millennial period, where things are going to be, it's going to be a different atmosphere during the millennial period. Okay. Some of the curses of sin uh, will be mitigated. For instance, the idea that we are that if we live to be 100 years old today, you're an old dude, and in the millennial period, they said if someone dies at 100 years of age, it's like, oh my, they died so young, and they'll still be able to um, live a long, long time because I believe the atmosphere and the earth itself, part of the curse of sin will be taken away and mitigated while Yeshua is here on earth. Now that's kind of my take on it, and um, that's kind of the way I would look at it anyway. I hope that helps.
Thank you. And can you talk about the slide before to talk about God claiming Jerusalem? Can you talk a little bit about that? What exactly? Is that a little something different than we knew before? It sounds like the first time I remember that one. Of course,
Well,
so go ahead.
um, well, God has always, He's laid claim to all of. I mean, in when He was talking about the Shemitah and the Yovel, He said, "Okay, you guys are, you're just leaseholders, kind of like people in Hawaii. You can't own the land in Hawaii. All you can do is lease it." And here He's saying, this is my land. I let you live here, and so you live by my rules in terms of inheritance and going back to the clans and so forth. But he had said he's always had the area of Jerusalem as his special spot because he says you're not to offer sacrifices anywhere, sacrifices to be anywhere other than where I place my name. Now, we know that there are some exceptions because of think God tells people to do certain things, but like with up on Mount Carmel, and the sacrifice there, Elijah um, with
With the
the
fire
altar,
and the rain.
yeah, all that kind
Yep.
of stuff.
Yeah, and the
Uh,
stones. Yep.
but that's where God had, that was a special case. But he says, no, you don't offer sacrifices. In other words, he did not want people offering sacrifices all over Israel because that's
Okay.
what got them into the idolatry thing to begin with.
Right.
No, you offer sacrifices right there in Israel where I put my name. And so he has put his name from, as long as there's been human history, that's where he put his name. And so I think coming then in the millennial period, he's just going to kind of reclaim that particular spot because Ezekiel said he saw the glory of the Lord leaving the temple there in Jerusalem, and it was gone. And
Okay.
so when he comes back in the millennial period, I believe the glory of God is going to come back in Jerusalem, over Jerusalem, and it's just going to be something that we can't even contemplate or see to be able to see the glory of God in a city, in a building called the temple. It's just going to be awesome.
Praise God. Praise God. Now, is this where we're supposed to go? The nations are supposed to come every Sukkot or celebrate
Yeah.
Sukkot once a
Every
year.
yeah, every year at Sukkot, all of the nations will have to send a representative to Jerusalem and to offer us to bring an offering and acknowledge the kingship of the Messiah. And that's where if they don't do that, if they fail to do that, and they're liable to be some idiots that decide, nah, we're not going to do that. And then if they do, they're going to suffer terribly for a whole year.
And that's that iron rod again.
There you go. There you go. So, I mean, it's not going to be perfect in the millennial period. I might even still have a few weeds in my garden. I don't know, but um, it's going to be many 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 times better than it is today. But it won't be absolute. It's not going to be heaven as such.
So how's the nation of priests going to perform during that time?
Well. we're called to be nation of priests, and even today. And what is that? What does a priest do? A priest stands in and stands up to be a an advocate and an intercessor for the people to the Lord. And so, as a nation of priests, all of us then would still be, our job would be to bring people to the Lord, even I think even in the millennial period, because
Okay.
there'll still be a lot of I think there will be enough sinners left over that all of us will have a
All right. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, anybody else have a comment or question tonight before we close it down? All right, guys. Well, in that case, yeah, okay. There's a couple, Warren, and then Scott and Lori.
No, I'm just saying thank you. That's all.
All right.
And
Good night.
Shavua Tov.
Okay. Shavua Tov. Shalom, shalom. And then Scott and Lori.
Yeah, we just also wanted to say thank you. We loved the lesson tonight. But we're also praying for that cough of yours.
Yeah, well, all right. Let me hang on here just a second. I am going to undo the share and let's see. I need to stop the share. I'm going to stop the share so that I can also undo the what do you call that? The live stream now.